Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi wa ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Once upon a time, Prophet ﷺ, he was walking in the market and he found a young boy, 12 years age. How old are you? Perfect. So he found someone like you. And he was going, have you ever slaughtered a goat? No? Yeah? No? You have? Like taking a knife and... No, okay. So this young boy, he was 12, 13 years of age and he had recently slaughtered a goat. So how many of you have actually slaughtered a goat in your life? Raise your hands. Like you've slaughtered and skinned and, you know, puri khal utar ke sara kuch kis cheez mein kiya hai? Haath to khade rakhe apne. Just slaughtered. Khal wal nahi utari. Bachpan mein bhi nahi kabhi. Acha. Acha. जी खाल उतारी है अच्छा अभी तक उतार रहे
उसने स्टार्ट किया
अच्छा तो वहाँ एक ना something very interesting happened. So this boy, he didn't know how to take off the skin. So what he was doing is he was using a knife and you know जो भी गलत तरीके से कर रहा था. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was crossing and he saw with the Sahabas and he saw him taking off the skin the wrong way. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes up to him and he tells the boy, "Tanahha ya bunay, side pe hato." Right? And then the narrator, the Sahabas that were there, he's there and they're telling the story that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he basically rolled his sleeves all the way until you could see the whiteness of the armpits. And then he took his hand and he put it all the way down into the skin until you could no longer see ila katifayhi, until the shoulder. And then he did it 2-3 times and then he turned to the boy and he said, Ya bunayya hakadha faslakh. Aise khal utari jati hai. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam carried on going. Right? He didn't stop, he carried on going. Then as he's going into his market, he comes across another young man and he had recently set up a soup shop. Right? So hadith mein aata hai maraq. Maraq is like in Urdu we say yakhni. You know what we have. So he had recently set up a soup shop. So as Prophet ﷺ, he passed by this young man, not a boy, a young man, he says to him, "Atabat maraquk." Is your soup ready? And not only ready, like is your soup done to perfection? So then that young man, he responds to Rasulullah ﷺ in like, you know, this passionate response, and he says, "Na'am ya Rasulullah, laqad tabat maraqi." That my soup is definitely ready and it's like the best soup. Then Prophet ﷺ, he opened, you know, the lid of the soup and then he found a bone from it. And then he started licking, he took the bone out and he started licking on the bone and then he responded to the child and he said, "Na'am, laqad tabat maraquk." Yes, your soup has been done to perfection. So this Sahabi who was narrating and he says, so I saw Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and as he walked in the market, as long as I could see, he kept on licking onto that bone. And then Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went away. So the purpose of me sharing this story is like when I asked how many of you have slaughtered, most of the young children have not slaughtered. But most of the older uncles, they've actually done the slaughters. Right? And I think one of the responsibilities of a previous generation to the next generation is to pass on those life skills, right? That you and I maybe we were taught the skill by our parents, our grandparents, but due to the busyness of modern day grandparents on their cell phones, right? And non-stop, you know, cricket or WhatsApp or siyasat.com and all of the other things that you see. No, I'm serious. We do not have that time to pass on that knowledge to the next generation. And the same goes for the woman. ghar mein rehna kaise hai, all of that things, all of these things are skills that are a generational skill that did not just grow onto you one day, it was passed down over generations. And unfortunately, what we're going through right now is this epidemic of the next generation completely disconnected from this whole knowledge that is not found in books, that's not found in hadith, that's not found in Quran, it's only found in that generation. And that will disappear. And we talked about it, if you remember the other day, about like that Jewish person and how their generation is passing that, their older generation is taking that norms to pass on that knowledge. And that is something very important. And due to the lack of that knowledge, or due to the lack of the connection that the children have with the older generation, they have certain problems that many of you have never even heard of or even thought of. And I'll give you examples because I've been teaching the youth camp at Al-Huda, and basically I gave the kids in the youth camp this opportunity to share whatever they need to share with me on a notebook or on a piece of paper, but they don't need to write their names on it. So I don't know who's asking the question. What's more important for me is what is the question, right? And in the 4 days, the type of questions, I've shared a few with Dr. Idris, and he could not, like, I saw his facial expressions, like the type of things that, for example, my generation, when the ones that are like 29, 30, 40, our generation, when we were growing up, the type of questions we had, these children have questions that your minds are just going to, like, for example, one of the girls, a 13-year-old girl, she says, and she draws an image, and I showed Baba, of her brain, and she tells me 2% of my day is everything, 98% of my day is thinking about sex. She drew this, like an image. So I said, can you explain to me what's going through your brain? So she drew a pie graph, and she said, 2% is everything else in my life, 98% is this. Now, her fear, when she describes, is not that... So she's already considered that this is a completely normal thing. So watching all of that haram is a completely normal thing. And she's given herself all these justifications. And then her fear is, if my parents find out, they will stop me from watching it, and I'm going to have a psychological problem in my life. It's not about like Allah is going to be concerned, or my parents are going to be concerned that I'm watching this stuff. The issue is, how am I going to, meri khuraq, this is my food. I'm worried that if my parents find out, my food is going to be stopped. And that is one of the smallest, the type of questions I have. One of the girls, she's there and she's mentioning that her parents don't know anything, and she's an addict of crystal meth, the one I talked about yesterday, and Ittefaq last Saturday, addict, she drinks, she's only 12. So then I asked, and I communicate with them, so I asked them, where do you find alcohol? I mean, you're not 18, how do you find? And then she describes, there is a guy in school, he's 17, he's actually selling it to us, and we can go to his car at the back after school. I sometimes miss my bus, and I tell my parents that puri story batati hai. Right? There's another guy, he's asking this question. The question is not about having haram relationship with a girl. The question is, what is Islam's opinion about having haram relationships with two girls at one time? That's the question he asked me. He's not worried about doing, he's like, is there anything that prohibits me doing it with two rather than one? Right? So the more I explored with my answers to their problems, I came down to the conclusion that it's the lack of communication that is taking place between parents and the grandparents with these children. Inshallah, this week I have another 4 days with them. I will explore a lot more. But my bottom conclusion with all of what's happening, so I asked questions. How much time do you spend in a day speaking to your mother? How much time do you spend speaking to your father? And we calculated from the 30 kids, combined, each child mentioned ke itne minute, combined of 30 kids did not cross 2 hours. Combined of 30 बच्चों के सारे hours calculate करके भी 2 घंटे नहीं हुए थे. Total time that the parents spent talking to these kids. So I really implore that we take this opportunity to create things or certain policies in the house, certain way of living, which is, for example, even Bill Gates, the guy who invented Microsoft. After 5 p.m., no internet is allowed in his house. That's it. His grandkids are not given a smartphone. Right? If you look at all, like Jonathan Ives, the guy who actually designs the iPhone, his kids and grandkids are not allowed to have smartphones. And likewise for his own household. They have rules in place. And unless and until we think, because look, smartphone is going nowhere from our lives. It's part of our lives. We have to develop ways of disconnecting from this so that we can really connect with what matters, which is the next generation to come. And Subhan'Allah, I have not been able to sleep for the last 1 week. And I was telling this to this uncle that, like I'm sitting there and I'm like, how do we help these kids? And these kids are so afraid to talk to you parents. They don't want to come and talk to you. One of the childs, he wrote the whole page because he knew that nobody in the world can be trusted. One of the girls, she said, if Brother Ahmed, you do not help me by the end of this week, I have already decided I'm leaving Islam. Her mother comes and studies at Al-Huda. And I sat with her for almost 1 hour, going through so many questions they have, but there's nobody that is willing to take the time to explain to them. She already said that I've already decided this, I'm just giving it a last try. If you guys can answer my questions. One of the child's, the first page, we asked them to write 3 pages. The whole 3 pages he wrote describing all the galiyan that he knows. He's like, let me tell you about my mind. Here are all the swear words. 3 pages he filled with just describing all the galiyan he knows. The only reason they're able to do that is because I don't know who they are. And they know that nobody's ever going to find out who they are. Right? So we are living... the last session I had was with girls. So Ada group tha, so the other teacher, he took the men and I took the girls. So I asked the question, Aap log kaun sa show dekhti hain? What's your show? Just to understand what's your favorite shows. Any of you know Game of Thrones here? Come on, raise your hand, bro. You know Game of Thrones. Raise your hands. Right? Game of Thrones. Most of you have never even heard. I told my mamu Game of Thrones, so उन्होंने कहा ये कौन सा talk show होता है कल रात को. उन्होंने कहा ये कौन सा talk show. This Game of Thrones is the filthiest show that has ever come on television. Filthiest in terms of nudity, sexual content. It's almost pornography. Okay? And I asked the girls, I said, you have to be candid with me so that I can help you with this. Pretty much all of them, sari 15 saal se choti thi, they all raised their hands that they've all seen all the 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. Okay? We are in a deep trouble right now in our community with the next generation. हम सोच भी नहीं सकते उसका. You know, last week, just Sheikh Dawood, he gave a lecture in the masjid and he said, look around you, right? Aap iske andar, ikka dukka, but these one or two exceptions, may Allah preserve them. Other than that, the majority of the people that are 35, 40 parents and unke jo aage bache, they're not coming to the masjids. So there is a real discussion we need to have as to how do we open up the masjids, what roles each and individual one of you, what can you do in your lives, in your capacity to be able to solve these problems, to be that uncle that you can share this information with. Most of you grew up in environments जिसमें आपके neighbors, अगर आप कुछ कहते थे, आपने गलती की, अब्बू नहीं थे, तो your neighbors would come and वो आपको लगा देते थे. I still remember growing up in that environment. I remember once, you know, I got into a fight with my sister. तो मैंने अपनी बहन को, I was I think 10 साल का था या 11 साल का था, मैंने उसे मार दिया. तो obviously लड़के होने के, she started bleeding. उसके यहाँ से यानी कि खून निकला. तो हमारे हमसाये होते थे, हिफ्जान साहब, he came and he gave me one. Right? I ran back to my mother and I said, Mama, Hifzan uncle ne mujhe mara, and my mom gave me another one. Right? And she said, अच्छा किया, 2 लगानी चाहिए थी, 1 लगाई उन्होंने. Right? I'm not saying we hit our kids, but there was a societal way of fixing these problems. जहाँ कोई टेढ़पन आ रहा होता था, तो there was a way to bring back to the normal. Unfortunately today, in the household, if you are the older one, you are, you know, as my Nana rahimahullah used to say, that you are the mother, you are the father, you are the hamsaya, you are the mamu, you are everything for them. But if we are distracted, then this, where we're headed, is an extremely, many of the kids, and this was the shocking part, you know, many of the kids, 80% of them go to Islamic schools. One of the childs, he actually mentioned that, I don't want to mention the Islamic school he goes to, and he says, in that school, our handicapped bathroom is known for a place to have sex. एक और बच्चे ने मुझे कहा, my Islamic school teacher is touching me in my private parts. Teacher, how do I help? How do you help me? और मैं आगे आगे आपको बताऊं ना, तो आप लोगों की, you cannot imagine the problems our kids are going through. So be that trusted ear that child can listen to. और वो ऐसे नहीं होगा, उसको आपको टाइम देना होगा, उसको आपको आइसक्रीम में खिलाने के लिए लेके जाना होगा, until he feels that comfort with you कि he can share this information. क्योंकि एक बड़े होने के फियर की वजह से वो बच्चे की हमारे साथ ये सारी चीज़ें नहीं शेयर करते. जब हमने जनरल Q&A किया, ये सारे मसले नहीं आए थे. जब हमने पेपर पे कहा कि एनोनिमसली आप जो अपने मसले हैं वो लिखें, तो ये सारे मसले आए. So, I mean, एक तो ये कि आप लोग तहज्जुद के अंदर रात को उठ के आने वाली जनरेशन के लिए, it's an extremely difficult situation that our youth are going through. The constant bombardment of unsolicited sexual content. You know, there's studies that have shown that it has increased by 280% in the last 2 years. Unsolicited, i.e. कि वो बच्चा इसके लिए नहीं गया था, but through an ad or through some form of unsolicited way, he was driven to this content. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us the tawfiq that we're able to solve these kids' problems. और मस्जिदों के अंदर भी और environment ऐसी हमें create करने की ज़रूरत है. चाहे, you know, even the other day I was talking to one of the guys, I'm like, इसका मतलब कि अगर हमें वो ये आधे carpet उठा के basketball court create करनी पड़े, तो वो ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है हमारी next generation के लिए. But having a carpeted masjid, having a rolled carpeted masjid is a much more important thing. जहाँ पे आप carpet roll करते हैं, this becomes a gym for you, because otherwise those kids are going other places that you and I cannot even imagine. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم.